Hey guys, it's Mo, and oh my gosh, has it been so long since I have been able to have the time to sit down and record a video, and I've been so frustrated because the last few weeks I have really wanted to make this video and I've either just had no energy or no time or the lighting's been bad, but I'm just glad that I can record this for you guys today. I know there's been so much going on since the past, it's been like a month I think since I've recorded a video. I posted some stuff, but that was all just stuff that I pre-recorded before I went back to work. And wow, so much stuff has happened over the past few weeks and continuing to happen. And it's just so crazy, and I've had so much anxiety. I need to stop looking at the news because every time I look, it's always something bad is happening, and I just want to not be so negatively affected by that. So I just want to say thank you guys for subscribing. There have been so many new subscribers within the past month, and I just want to say thank you for subscribing, and I hope you like the videos that I continue to put out on my channel. But yeah, I'm just so happy to sit down and record this video today for you guys. I went back to work. My quarantine lockdown has ended. Now I'm working more than I was working even pre-COVID, so that's just been like really crazy to get used to. Working so many hours, and my reading has definitely taken a back seat, I will say, and my just social media in general has taken a back seat. YouTube has taken a back seat. I finally just the other day was able to respond back to all of the comments that I've gotten on previous videos for the past month. So thanks for being patient with me. I'm going to try and make as many videos as I can while I'm still working, but this one I really for me was like the #1 priority. I wanted to, like, I got up early before work right now so I could record this video for you guys and actually put makeup on because I'm wearing a mask at work all the time, so I don't even really wear makeup to work. So these books are not meant to be one and done lists of books recommended by Black authors. As someone who is half Black and half Mexican myself, I always, well not always, but I would say in the past few years I've been really trying to diversify my shelves more, and I know that that's something that 99% of us can do more of, is diversifying our bookshelves and reading stories by Black people, about Black people. And I just, those kinds of books I've discovered for myself over the past few years are stuff that I really like to read. So in this video I'm going to be giving you guys 40 recommendations of books by Black authors, and most of these I have read. 10 of them are books, the last 10 I'm going to talk about are books that I own that I really want to get to soon. So let me know if you guys have read any of these books. There is bound to, I feel like, be at least a few that you haven't read. So my challenge to you is to not just, if these books you own already and they're sitting on your shelves, read them. If you're planning on buying them, read them. Don't just let them sit on your shelves, because we are all familiar with the fact that in the publishing industry, like many other industries, that it is not a very diverse space for us, and I just want to help contribute to bringing more diversity, not just to BookTube, but to helping just promote books by Black authors, because I wish there were more that were published and that there were more that had a bigger platform. So I just hope to be able to use my platforms to be able to give a small voice to books by these authors. So after that long-winded introduction, let's go ahead and get right into the books. So I've separated all 40 books into 3 categories. The first one we're going to go into are books that are young adult genre, and I'm not going to get too much into the plots of all these books because I'm going to be mentioning 40 books. I don't want this book to be 5 hours long. Oh my gosh. I don't want this video to be 5 hours long. So I'm just going to briefly go through all of these. You can look them up on Goodreads for sure. I'm going to try and include a list somewhere, either in the description box or in the comments below. I'll have a list of all of these books and the authors so that you can refer back to it later if you're wanting to remember certain books that you're wanting to pick up. So the first one is If You Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson. Some of these books I've read multiple books by the author, and I'm just like pulling one that I wanted to recommend the most to you guys. So this one, we're following a mixed race couple. One is Black and one was Jewish, I believe. It's pretty short, but they both just come from really different backgrounds, and them having to figure out how they're going to make a relationship work. I just love this book. I'm going to be rereading this next year for sure. next year, if you're wondering why I'm saying next year, because next year I want to do a big reread of a lot of the books that I have loved but I haven't read for a while to see if I still feel the same way about them. So this is one of the ones that's for sure going on there. Then we have 145th Street by Walter D. Myers. I read this one recently, and this is a cool short story collection in the young adult genre. And they all take place, with a thread that ties them all together is they all take place on the same block. I believe it's in Harlem, yeah, 145th Street in Harlem. Then we have Slay by Brittney Morris. This was a really exciting book when I first got it because it was the first time I ever received a physical arc of a book, and I was just so excited, and the book definitely lived up to the hype. It's like a video game inspired book because the main girl, she creates this really cool game. It's called Slay, and it's like an online multiplayer card game, and it's just really good, and I just wish that it really existed in life because I'm not even someone who is into playing like online games, video games, that kind of stuff, but the one in here is one that I definitely would play if it was a real thing. Then we have Elizabeth Acevedo. I love all of her books. I have read all of them. I don't own all of them. I own only 2 of them. I want to own the other 2 eventually, but you know, space is limited. But this one, we are following a girl, her name is Moni, I believe. She's a teen mom, and she's dealing with raising her daughter, figuring out relationships in life, and what she wants to do for the future. She's really into cooking, and this was before, I read this before I got super into cooking, and I just, now that I am more into it, I kind of want to reread this one to see, just so I can appreciate those aspects of the book more. Like, she includes little recipes and things, and I really love her work. This one is not told in verse. Some of her books are told in verse. This one is a regular novel, and I just really enjoyed this one. Next, we have another popular author, and that's Angie Thomas, and for her I chose The Hate U Give, but I love her other book on the come up as well. I know she has another book coming out this year, and the cover on that one is just beautiful too, and I know that many people are familiar with this one. A lot of people, especially now with everything going on recently, have been reading this book. It does have to do with police shooting and brutality, and definitely some harder topics there, and but very relevant. And I know a lot of people have been recommending this book, but I will say, while this book is good, don't let this be the only book that you pick up by a Black author. If you're trying to learn more about the Black experience and things that are going on, I would say this is a good maybe starting point, but don't let this be the only book that you read by a Black author. Next, we have The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I love this book, and I went into it with such low expectations, and it really just blew me away. So this book takes place over the course of one whole day, and I didn't really know if I had much confidence in that type of setup, but I just really enjoyed this book. I watched the movie for it, and I really liked it, and this is the one of the ones I'm really interested to see if it lives up to a reread, so we'll have to see about that. Next, for my Jason Reynolds pick, because I love all of Jason Reynolds' books, I could recommend you any of them, I went with Long Way Down. This one is a novel that is told in verse. So we're following a boy. His name is Will, and his older brother Sean is the one who has been shot, and he is determined that he is going to go and seek vengeance and revenge for the killing of his brother. And this book is kind of more abstract in that he gets on this elevator, and he's going down to the street level of his building, and along the way it stops on each floor, and someone different gets on that has something to say about what's going on. And I don't want to like say too much about what's going on in the book, but it's just a really good book, and once again another one I want to reread soon. Next, we have Dear Martin by Nick Stone, another book that is very relevant to everything that's going on right now. So we're following a young man in this one. He's having to deal with racism, police brutality, and what makes this novel a little bit different is that he's writing these letters to Martin Luther King Jr. kind of just to figure out the things that are going on, process everything, try to see and think, you know, what would he do in the situations that he finds himself in this book. Next, we have What Momma Left Me by Renee Watson, another really good book, you guys. I don't even want to say too much about what goes on in it because I went into this book not really knowing too much myself. We're following a young girl. Her name is Serenity, and she is growing up with being raised by her grandparents. I won't get into the specific circumstances of why she's being raised by her grandparents, because I think that's something that is better left to being found out as the story unfolds. But there's just a lot of strong, big topics touched on in this book. Another one I can't wait to reread, even though I think I read this one this year already, but I already want to read it again. One thing I liked about this book is that Renee's grandparents, they have a strong belief in their faith, and it's something that she's also having to work through and figure out herself in the book. And that's not something I read about a lot in books in general, and specifically in young adult. So that was something that really made this one stand out to me. And then lastly, but not least, for the young adult books, I'm just gonna take the price sticker off here. Well, this one's stuck because it's a Target one, is Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds. This one is a time travel book, which is not something I'm always really into reading about. Time travel movies and books for me are usually kind of misses. But this one I really did enjoy, and we're following a young black boy. His name is Jack, and he is top of the class, he's valedictorian, and then he meets this one girl, Kate, and he instantly has this connection with her. Something happens because, I won't tell you how, but it's no surprise here because it happens very quickly in the book, is that Kate dies. For some reason, Jack keeps going back in time to the moment they met and reliving that whole experience of leading up to her dying, and he's trying to change the outcome of it. And I really enjoyed this book. It's been a while now, so I can't even exactly remember the ending of the book, like how it all resolves, but I remember just really enjoying this book. I think I listened to it on audiobook, and it really was just entertaining and kept my attention, and I feel like the time travel aspect for me was done really well. So on to the next section. I'm going to be recommending 10 adult fiction books. So like with all these, they're not really in any particular order. They're just in the order that I randomly pulled them from my shelves. So the first one we have is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which I have read his other book, The Underground Railroad, which I would recommend as well. In the Nickel Boys, it's not a true story, but it's based on true events of these reform schools that were in Florida. I forget what year this was in the 1960s, and we're following Elwood, who his life is on this one specific path, and then something happens and he ends up ending up at one of these academies. And the way that they would treat kids then, especially the black kids, because it was definitely segregated and separated there, is just horrifying, and something I had never heard about until I had read this book. So I feel like that's why it's so important to read books about, even when it's people of your own culture, you just really get to know people's stories that you never would have been aware of otherwise. Next, we have another book that I'm really looking forward to rereading, because to be honest, I think I read this book maybe like 10-ish or so years ago, but I remember really connecting with it, but I just haven't had an opportunity to read it again. So that is Native Son by Richard Wright. I really like his books. I've read Native Son and Black Boy. I have, I believe it's called Clara Callan, on my shelves as well that I haven't gotten to yet. So in this book, we're following Bigger Thomas, and I'm gonna have to refer back to the back of this one a little bit because I don't remember the specific details of what happened in this book, but I just remember being really affected by it. And he's headed for jail. It was for murder and rape. It tells the story of a young black man caught in a downward spiral after he kills a young white woman in a brief moment of panic. Set in Chicago in the 1930s. And it's a powerful novel with reflecting on the poverty and feelings of hopelessness for what it means to be black in America. This is one for sure is going onto my reread list for next year. Next, we have a short story collection, and that's called Friday Black by Nana, Kwame, Adjei, Brenyah. With the short story collection, it's kind of hard to summarize what it's about because each short story is different, but this is one that I feel like does the short story really well. Racism is one of the main themes and that are talked about and explored through these different stories, where we're really following just ordinary people going through these different extraordinary circumstances. But it doesn't just talk about racism and the justice system. Also, it talks about like consumerism and how that really affects all of us. This is definitely a short story collection that I would like to reread and annotate, you know, like which stories I liked best and stuff. So Eventually I would like to do that with most of my short story books, would be to go back, reread, annotate, and then like make a review video for you guys, but I mean, who knows when I'm gonna have time for that. So next one is Passing by Nella Larsen, and this one is a classic. It's first published in 1929, and we're following two black women. One of them, she has like the perfect, enviable husband and sons, and she lives in a comfortable Harlem townhouse, and then her life starts to slip a little bit when she is reconnected with a lost childhood friend. Her name's Claire, and Claire is light-skinned, she's charming, she's beautiful, and for years she has passed as being white. Even her husband doesn't know that she's actually black, so the fact that they're being put back into each other's lives can really have some bad consequences for both of them. So this is another good book that I would love to reread eventually one day. I think it might be being made into a movie. Don't quote me on that, but I want to say, like, when I read this and I was researching the book afterwards, I had heard it was being made into a movie. Next, we have my Zora Neale Hurston pick, and that is Their Eyes Were Watching God. I will say this book was not an instant love for me. I think I read it, or attempted to read it, years ago. And because it's told in, the speaking is written out in dialect, it was too hard for me to understand at the time. But I want to say I did attempt to read this again like a year or two ago, and I just fell in love with it so much. And I was so mad at myself for not trying harder to get into the book at the time, but I'm just glad that eventually I came to my senses and I really enjoyed this book. Another one I would love to reread one day. And I watched the movie for this one too with Halle Berry, which was a fun experience, you know, watching the movie and after having read the book. So in this one, we're following a young woman, and it takes place in, I want to say this takes place in Mississippi. We're following the relationship she has with a few different men at the time, and I don't really want to even say too much. Once again, this is one I went into not knowing too much, and it was just nice to get the story to find out the story as I was reading it instead of already going into it knowing everything. Next we have a play, one I talked about recently in my last wrap up, and that is For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough by Ntozake Shange. I wish I had looked up how to properly say her name before I had made this video, but this one is a really good play. I don't read too many plays, but this one I really did enjoy. It's kind of told half in play, half in poetry, and it really just explores different experiences that Black women have experienced in their life and have gone through, and the way it's written about and explored I really enjoyed, and I really just want to find more plays like this that I can just really love and stand so much. Speaking of plays, we're also going to talk about my other one that I really like, and that is A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. I think I've read this one at least like 2 or 3 times because I know this is one that we went over in high school, but I didn't really remember too much of it. And in this play, it was first produced in 1959. In this one, we're following, it's really just a portrait of a family that's living in Chicago, and they are about to have this change in their life. But I'm so terrible at explaining things, especially when it's been so long since I read it, and I can't remember what I should and shouldn't say about the book specifically. But I just really enjoyed this one. I really loved the characters, and they're about to, I think they were like about to move and get into a better living situation than they were previously. Like I said, I'm not going to give anything away, but if you like plays, I would read this one. Next, we have a sci-fi book, and this is my Octavia Butler pick, and that is Kindred. And I really enjoyed this book. It was my first one by her, and really one of the jumping off points of books that really got me interested in reading more science fiction. I recently purchased, it's not here yet, but a collector's edition of this book from Folio Society. It was really beautifully done. I've been eyeing it for so long, and I wanted to get it before it sells out, so hopefully that will be here soon. I will show you guys that in an upcoming haul video whenever it gets here. But this book is a sci-fi book. We're following a woman, her name's Dana, and on her 26th birthday, she's living in California with her husband. She suddenly finds herself transported back into antebellum South, into slavery times. And it's somehow connected with this young man. His name's Rufus, and she can't control it. It's very dangerous for her to go back. I just remember having so much anxiety when I was reading this book, like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? Like, this is crazy. What if something, like, just to think of someone in modern day, and even this wasn't super modern day, because this book came out in 1979, so even from someone then going back into the South is just like a crazy experience to figure out how to adapt and survive. And on top of that, like, knowing what things are in the future, it's just really well done. I love Octavia Butler's books, and I will always love her books. Next, we have Washington Black by Acevedo. This one, I was actually able to meet the author when I went to a book festival last year in San Francisco, back when that was a thing, and I was able to have the book signed. I also was able to have my other book signed, An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, which I would have included in this video, but I can't find where I put it, so we're just going to talk about this one. And in this one, we're following an 11-year-old boy. His name is George Washington, or they call him Wash, and he's a field slave in Barbados on a slave plantation. And we see his life there, but not just there. We follow him through a good portion of his life. So the person who is his master, the master's brother, is very different, and he's more on the abolitionist side, and he and Wash, they have this just crazy adventure together, and I really enjoy this book. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's one that I would like to reread again. And I'm just going to say it now, the same for this one too, by Jesmyn Ward, Salvage the Bones. This book was so good. You guys, I just need to reread it again. So it takes place in Mississippi, and we are following this group of young children who live with their father, and they live in and pretty much in poverty, I think it was, from what I can remember. They each have things they're dealing with in the book, but specifically as she's the oldest, I think all the rest of the kids are boys. She's pregnant, and she's having to deal with being a teen mom. At the same time, this takes place around the time of, I believe it was Hurricane Katrina that was happening. Don't quote me on that. Throughout the novel, we have this sense of dread and something that's coming that's not good, and it's just really atmospheric in that way. This was my first time reading a Jesmyn Ward book, and it will not be my last. I really want to read her other books. I think next for me is going to be The Men We Reaped. I would like to get to Sing Unburied Sing as well. I just really enjoy this book. Now, this next section is for all of my nonfiction lovers out there. I love reading nonfiction, and so I have 10 books I want to recommend to you guys. The very first one is called A Well-Read Black Girl, and this is edited by Glory Edom. And I love this book. I read it a few years ago when it came out. It's like super cute, first of all, can we just say. And there's a whole bunch of writings in here by different authors, like Jesmyn Ward, who I was just talking about, Jacqueline, Woodson, I just mentioned her to you guys, Tayari Jones, many other Black authors as well. And it's just a collection about them and their experience with reading and their experiences with writing, and it's just a really good anthology. I would definitely recommend. Then we have a graphic novel. This is the first in the series. I've only read the first one because I only own the first one. I need to get the other two soon, and that is March by John Lewis and Andrew Aiden and Nate Powell. Specifically, we're following the story of John Lewis growing up. He is a congressman. He was one of the key figures in the civil rights movement. He went from being on an Alabama sharecropper farm to the halls of Congress, from a segregated schoolroom to the 1963 March on Washington. And through the different volumes, so this is volume 1, I believe there's 3, and this first one we're following him as a kid growing up, and I'm sure like we get to see his later life in the following volumes. I just haven't read them yet. This is really good. I want to reread it, but once I have the other 2 volumes, of course. Next, we have a book I want to recommend, which technically I haven't finished yet, but I still wanted to include it on this because I just already can tell that I'm really loving this book. I'm about a quarter of the way in. I just have not had any time to read lately. and that is A Black Woman's History of the United States by Dana Ramey Berry and Callie Nicole Gross. This is a look at the United States from the perspective of looking at what was going on with Black women through all of these major things that have been going on, and I'm learning so much stuff that I never was even aware of before. So as a nonfiction reader, I would definitely, if there was like only one book in this of these nonfiction books I recommend most, it probably would be this one. And it just looks, it's putting a Black woman back into this history of the United States, because we were always there, but not really talked about as much as we should have been. But it's just very, very, I can't say enough about how much I'm enjoying reading this book so far. Learning about the different experiences of these Black women is just so interesting. And while a lot of them unfortunately aren't the best stories, because the history of Black women hasn't always just been like sunshine and roses, it's a very relevant book, I would feel like, to read today. Okay, my camera battery, well, my camera just like automatically stopped recording, so I hope that all of that made it in. But the next book we have is Alicia Keys' More Myself. This is her autobiography. I'm not going to talk too much about this book because I'm going to be doing a standalone review. Hopefully it will be coming up within the next week or so, but this book just came out like a month or two ago, and it's an autobiography written by herself on her life. I didn't really know too much about Alicia Keys before going into this book. I literally didn't know anything but her music, so I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, I don't want to say too much because I'm going to be doing a whole standalone review, so stay tuned if you want to hear more about that one. Next we have a memoir, and that is The Girl Who Smiled Beads by Clementine Wamaria and Elizabeth Well. Clementine was 6 years old. It takes place in 1994 during the Rwanda massacre, and that's when she and her 15-year-old sister Claire, they fled the Rwandan massacre. They spent the next years migrating between different African countries, and we really just see their experience of having to cope and deal with being a part of that. Like, that's, for me, one of the big things in history. Like, everyone I feel like has certain things in history that really just stick out with them and affect them. And for me, like, reading about the Rwandan genocide is just one of those things that I've read a lot of books on, and it doesn't matter how many books I read, it's something that always it just makes me so sad to read about. But I feel like it's important that we remember the voices of the people who've gone through this terrible experiences. And next we have The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. This one we're following Anthony. He wrote this himself, who was wrongly incarcerated in jail. I forget for how many years specifically. He had 2 counts of capital murder. It took place in 1985. He was in jail for 30 years for a crime that he did not commit. And this one, another powerful book. It's wrongful conviction, and it's just like so hard to even imagine. But I really am glad that I picked up this book. I think it was one of you guys that actually recommended me to pick this one up after I read the next book I'm going to talk about, which is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, who is a lawyer and a social justice advocate, and he really helps through his organization that's called the EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative, to really help against racial and economic injustice, specifically against people who are in jail for crimes that they did not commit. He's really just so great to read about. I've watched the movie, obviously, with Michael B. Jordan, who I love. And this specific version is the one that's adapted for young adults. This was the only one I could get at the time that was available at Target when I was trying to read it, but eventually I would like to buy the actual original book and read that one. I would definitely recommend the book, recommend the movie. I would recommend reading both these books in tandem because Anthony Ray Hinton does make an appearance in the movie. So, an actor plays him, but yeah, his like character is in that movie as well. Next we have Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. This one is his stories from growing up this one is his stories growing up in South Africa and his childhood. This one was really good, and like I was aware of like, you know, the apartheid and things going on like that had happened in South Africa, but I wasn't super informed on it. And reading about it from the perspective of someone who dealt with that and grew up with that was definitely eye-opening for me. And I didn't really know too much about Trevor Noah before reading this book. Like I knew he was a comedian, but I'm not someone who really watches a lot of like comedy shows and stuff like that. I did watch his ones that are on Netflix after I read the book to kind of just like, you know, see what that's all about. But yeah, another one I would definitely recommend. Then we have Making Our Way Home by Blair Imani. This is a beautiful book. It's The Great Migration and the Black American Dream. So this one is an illustrated history of the Great Migration, which was following when 6 million Black Americans, they left the American South and they went to northern and western cities. Kind of takes place between like the 1910s and 1970s, and the impact that they had on American life and culture. And I just really love this book, one that I would definitely recommend and would reread again. I love the illustrations. I love how she really just takes history and makes it really accessible. Like this is super accessible. Like if you only were to read one nonfiction talking about like the Black experience and how it's kind of come to where it is today and what's been happening, I would recommend this one because it's just so easily readable and accessible. And my last nonfiction book is also another really beautifully illustrated one, and that is She Came to Slay by not by Harriet Tubman, by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. This book is about the life and times of Harriet Tubman. This book I wanted to pick up after I watched the movie Harriet that came out recently, well within the past like a year or two I believe. And this one is also illustrated as well as having like infographics and photos, not as many as the other one that I just mentioned, but it's really a thorough, and I would say like the book I mentioned, very accessible book on Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad and other things just about her. Like it's not just that, it's like the complete life and times of her. Like yes, the Underground Railroad was one part of her life, but we're seeing how she got there, her history before then, what happened after all of that. So it's just another good book I'd recommend. So we're on to the last part of the books that I'm going to be recommending to you guys. Well, kind of recommending, but also recommending them to myself. So I pulled 10 different books off of my shelves that are by Black authors that have been sitting on my shelves for way too long. Well, not all of them. Some of them are pretty recently. Are purchased pretty recently. But so these are ones all I want to read. So if you guys have read them, let me know what your opinion on them is about. I'm really excited to read these books. So yeah, let's just get into them. So the first one is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I hope I said, I've heard people say Angelo and Angelou, so I'm sorry, I don't know which one is appropriate. This one is her memoir, autobiography. I heard it's part of like a series. So like with all these books I haven't read them, so I'm not gonna be able to really give you guys too much of a plot summary. I haven't read them. But this one is, I believe, all about her life. I heard that it has some like really hard, rough stuff to read about in here, but I think there's like 7 or 8 books that are part of her biography series. But this one is definitely one that I really want to get to. So many people I've heard have loved this book, and it's about time that I went ahead and read it. Then we have The 100 Wells of Salaga by Ayesha Haruna Atta. Okay, so this book is based on the experiences of the author's great-great-grandmother in pre-colonial Ghana. And it's a story of courage, forgiveness, love, and freedom, told through 2 different women born to vastly different fates. I think I have the audiobook for this one, so I should listen to that. Next book I have not shown you guys at all on my channel before because I just recently got it. It'll be featured in an upcoming book haul video, and that is Knots and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. This is the Waterstones edition of it. I love the illustration cover on here, and it has the purple sprayed edges. This is the first in a series. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 altogether. I had self-control and only bought one because I want to make sure I like this book before I buy the whole series. But I'm really hoping that I do like it. So in this one, we're following 2 people who've been friends since childhood. They're living in a world of prejudice, fear, and mounting violence. Knots and crosses are fated to be enemies. I believe that it's a system where it's prejudiced like similar to like how it is today with Black and white people. I know that this has been adapted recently into a show, I believe, so I wanted to read the book obviously before I think about watching the show. But I'll let you guys know more about this book once I read it. Then we have The Source of Self-Regard by Toni Morrison. This book I can't wait to get to, but I'm first going to read through all of her backlist of stuff, and then I'm going to read this one, so it might be a little bit before I can get to this book, but I just think it's so beautiful and I just love the look of this book, and I really am enjoying reading through Toni Morrison's books, so this is just something that is going to be a real treat that I'm looking forward to getting to once I finish her novels. Next we have a young adult book, and that is The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. In this one, I believe we're following a group of young women who live in this like welcome house and their escape and journey from trying to find a better life for themselves. Next we have a fantasy book, and that is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This one I definitely want to get to soon, but I know there's the second one coming out this year, so I kind of want to wait until the second one comes out, so that if I really do enjoy this book, I can go straight into the second one and not have to wait a long time to read the sequel. And this one is an African-based fantasy book, I believe. I've talked about this multiple times on my channel. I just need to get to it already. Next we have Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. This one is a very slim little book, but I've heard it's definitely a very powerful one. We're following, I believe our main character, her brother is in jail, and she has some type of ability to be able to communicate with him while he's incarcerated, but through like some type of power or something. I don't know. It's like a dystopian book, I believe, as well, and I really like to read dystopian books, so hopefully this one's good. Then another Renee Watson book that I have owned that I want to get to is called Some Places More Than Others. I know I mentioned one of her other books before, and I really loved it, and it really made me want to read more books by her. This one also takes place in New York City, and we're following Amara, who is visiting her family. And I think she's just discovering more about her history and where she came from. Lastly, we have Black Sunday by Tola Rotimi Abraham, and this one, I don't really remember too much about what this one was about. We're following twin sisters in Lagos in 1996. They have a pretty comfortable life, but then their mother loses her job and their family becomes impoverished. And they end up joining this church where I think it might be some type of scam or something. But yeah, this one is a pretty recent release, and hopefully I can get to this one soon too. So I hope you guys enjoyed hearing all about these books. There was 40 books. That was a lot to talk about, but you can't say that you don't have any recommendations. And like I said, this isn't meant to be all-encompassing, like these are the 40 books by Black authors that you should read. These are just ones that I have come across that I want to share with you guys. I feel like my shelves are pretty diverse, but like anyone, I could always do better, and I really want to just buy more books by Black authors. I want to support them so that we can get more coming to us in the publishing industry, and they can see that there's a need for that and that we need to all diversify. And I know I could do better, and I always want to do as much as I can with my channel. So thanks for watching this video, you guys. Let me know, like I said, if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts on them were. Also, I think it would be really cool if down below, if there's books that you want to recommend and suggest to other people, go ahead and comment them down below. I'll definitely be checking them out and adding them to my Goodreads TBR, so eventually I can get them. I have a whole bunch of books I just ordered that are going to be coming in the mail soon by Black authors, so look out for that video whenever they would get here, probably in like a couple weeks. That is it. Thanks for watching. I'm so excited to be making videos again, hopefully regularly. I'm gonna try at least once a week, but we'll see. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.